What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today is a little maintenance day for the 4Runner. What we got to do is plugs and wires. I found a leak in the radiator, so I bought a new radiator. We got to swap that out. I'm going to do an entire coolant flush on it because the previous owner put green coolant in here, and these take the Toyota pink, I believe. It's called a pink or a red. So we're going to swap all that out, flush the entire system, get Toyota coolant back in it, and then we got an oil change. So just some general maintenance, and like a lot of you guys said, the radiator probably needs to be replaced on, like, I think my first video, a lot of you guys commented and said replace that radiator. Well, I did find a leak, so we're gonna replace that today. So here's the lineup. Other than the radiator, we got a set of Denso wires, Denso plugs, got a Bosch oil filter, got some 530 synthetic. I got a bunch of water to flush it out, and then I got this Toyota red coolant. This is a 50-50 mix already, so you don't have to add any water. So let's get started. Probably do plugs and wires first, and then I'll swap that radiator out, get everything flushed out, get new coolant in it, and then we'll change the oil. So here's a peek at the radiator. This is a Denso brand radiator. I picked this up on Rock Auto. You could probably find them on Amazon. Like always, I'll link everything I'm using down below in the description. So let's get started. Plugs and wires, very simple to do. This side's a little more tricky. I think you got to pull this little brace off here to be able to get that last plug wire out and to get down in there with a plug socket. Other than that, we'll probably have to pull this intake boot off to get that center coil out. But other than that, very simple to do. Just make sure when you're doing this, just take one plug wire off at a time so you don't swap them onto the wrong side. Because this side has the coil, and then there's just the wire that runs to this other bank. So make sure you get the wires back in the same orientation that they came off of, or you can Google a diagram of how they're routed. But I'm just going to do one at a time and make sure I don't mess it up. All right, guys, hard part's done. We got the driver's side plugs changed out. I want to show you something real quick with these plugs. So what these 3/4 take is this plug right here with dual post or whatever, dual electrode post. And what was in there is these singles with an abnormally large gap. So all the gaps are pretty much the same. Very, very large. So I imagine just putting these new plugs in is going to make a world of difference in how it runs. Alright guys, plugs and wires are done, so let's get on this radiator. To unbolt it, it's bolted from the front here, so we're going to pull the grill off, and the bolts run from here into the radiator, unlike the older ones that come from this side. So we got to take the grill out, get that out, and then to drain it, there's a petcock or a valve on the bottom of the radiator, and then on the passenger side of the block, underneath the manifold, there's another drain. I actually have another block over here I could show you. You can see this one has a plug right here. The newer ones, I believe, have a little spout. You just loosen the bolt up and there's a little spout off the end of it, and then you can drain the block that way. And then I'm going to dump water in it, get it all the way up to temperature, drain the water. I'll probably do that twice, make sure we get all that coolant out, and then we can fill it up with the red coolant. All right, we got the coolant drained out, so now we're gonna try flushing the system. So I'm just gonna start with straight water, and I wanna flush it probably 3 times. So I think I have 4 gallons of distilled water. That's not gonna be enough to fill it up that many times. So I'm gonna start with regular water, get the majority of the coolant out, and then we'll switch to the distilled water, get that flushed out. And I wanna show you guys the coolant that came out. I thought it was green. When I was looking in the cap, in the radiator, it looked green, but it's kind of almost a brown. So I think if I had to make a guess, I would say it had red coolant in it, and then someone topped it off with green, and that's why it kind of changes color into almost a brown. So you're really not supposed to mix coolants together, especially green and red. So glad I'm going through this whole process, flushing it all out. So let's get flushing and see what we can do. We are filled up with water, so I'm gonna bring it outside, get it all the way up to temperature, and then we'll drain this out. And we'll probably, like I said, I'll probably do that 3 or 4 times. Make sure we get all that coolant out of there. Alright guys, I got 4 flushes through it, and you can see the water's coming out nice and clear. So that's when you know that you got no more coolant left in the system. So I'm going to drain all this out, and then we can swap this radiator out and throw coolant back in it. All right, we got this thing filled up with coolant, so now we got to bleed it. What I do is I get a funnel that fits nice and snug in the neck of the radiator, and then we'll bring it outside. We'll try to find a little bit of a hill to get the front end up to make sure this is the highest point in the system, and then we'll put some coolant in the funnel, and then we'll just run it up to temperature and it'll bleed itself, and then we'll get the cap on. We'll fill this up. Well, we'll fill this about halfway, the reservoir, and as we're driving it, it'll actually pull in coolant from the reservoir to fill the system. So let's get it outside, get it warmed up, get this thing bled, and then we can change the oil. All right, looks like that's about all she's gonna take. So we'll see once this thing cools down. It should suck in the majority of this coolant because it obviously expands when it gets warm. So we'll see how much it sucks in, but let's get this oil changed. All right, you can see all this coolant pulled back into the radiator. So we can swap this cap on, and then once we drive it, it should pull all the coolant it needs out of that overflow. And then once I get back, I'll pop that cap, make sure that's topped off, and we should be good to go. All right, guys, made it back from test drive. It runs a little bit smoother maybe. Can't really tell much of a difference with the plugs and wires. I guess it really didn't run that bad before, so not that much of a surprise, but we have no leaks. We are good to go. Coolant is still showing about halfway up on the bottle there, right where it should be. So really didn't pull in that much coolant. We are full, oil is good to go. One thing I want to do before we end this video, I'm kind of curious to see what size wheels I could run on here as far as width and offset with the flares. These are a 10 wide wheel on the green truck. I'm actually going to pull one of these off and bolt it on just to get an idea of how wide I should go with the wheels. I was thinking a 10 wide wheel on the 4Runner just because it has that flare that's probably 3 inches wide. So you can run a lot wider wheel, and I think it'll look a lot better to fill in that gap. So let's pull one of these off. We'll throw it on the 4Runner and see what we're looking like. Oh, I got it on, and 10 wide is actually about perfect. It's sticking out a little bit, which I want. I wanted a, a little aggressive stance for it, so I think I'm going to shoot for a 10 wide. I'm not sure. We haven't decided what wheels, what size. Probably do 33s. However, that does look pretty big on there. I don't know exactly how high it would kind of be right now. I have it jacked up a little bit. I didn't really measure where it was gonna sit. So I picked up Bilstein with OME springs, the heavy duty springs. So I should get a full 3 inches or really close to it. So maybe I could kind of measure a little bit, but it'll probably be somewhere around there, which I don't know, should clear. Definitely clear in the front. These running boards, I was planning on taking them off anyway, but it looks like they're definitely gonna rub. So we'll see what happens when we get wheels, but I just kind of wanted a little bit of a test fit just to see, get an idea of what we're looking like for wheel specs. And honestly, putting that wheel on kind of gives a perspective of how it's gonna look with the front end, which really, like I said, it really comes together with a good set of wheels and tires. The bumper doesn't look so big and bulky and just kind of, you know, pushed way out. So I'm really stoked to get this thing lifted and get some wheels and tires on it. But for now, we'll throw the tires back on where they go, get this thing back on the ground, and be done with it for now. Well, there it is, guys. Maintenance on this 4Runner should be good for a while. I know I'm gonna have to do ball joints eventually. I did check them and there is no play at all in them, so I'm gonna ride it out for a while and see what they do. But I do know there is issues with those lower ball joints, so I'm gonna keep an eye on them. And if they get a little bit of play, I'm gonna replace them with OEMs. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.